Some of these stories here, well, I'll just step back. When I first finished school, from undergraduate and master's degree, I went back to work for my community, Six Nations, on mapping, where we needed to map our territories, we needed to map lands, and we started working on various mapping projects. And I was fortunate for over 10 years to work with other communities and work in various areas, from traditional land use mapping to infrastructure mapping. We just had such a need within communities, and I'm saying First Nations reserve parcels for the most part, because the context is very different in many other communities. But through my work and working with different communities, these questions, these stories, what we've been talking about and hearing today and over the past few days, or we continue to hear, what are the challenges of water, the disrespect to Mother Earth, water spirit, our activities, consumption, environmentalism, all the things that are around us. And I don't know why, perhaps it was an internal duty or I was driven, but I found myself at like 37 going back to school for a PhD. So it took 5 years to finish that degree. But my focus when I went back was I wanted to work in water security. I wanted to start understanding why these challenges persist. Why is it that one in every, we have over 100 at any given time of the 615 or 617 First Nations in Canada, that every 1 in every 6 can't drink the water. We're in Canada, we're this plentiful, blessed with fresh water resources, and countries look to us for our water, and these futures of water dependency, those water wars are happening around the world now. People are looking at the water here in Turtle Island in North America. So it sent me back, and my own learning, trying to figure this out. Who manages water? Who has responsibility over it? What is my personal responsibility, and what can I do? Some of the questions we're probably saying. And my own background, I was trained in science, and I studied coastal management, and I was a high school teacher. But when I went back, I was just like overwhelmed. I'm thinking, if I'm having a hard time, how are people doing this? So I spent a lot of time understanding what we'll call frameworks and ways of understanding, and looking at the policy, trying to understand, because I got really tired of the federal government looking at water problems on communities as a technical issue, that you just need a water plant, because it was failing to address those larger issues of ecosystem protection and these larger elements that we know that we have to do. And I just felt it was a narrow view, so I started looking, and throughout all my research, though, at the end of it, I mean, it's 5 years of classes and reading and learning and talking. I was fortunate enough through the end of it. My research project was actually talking with water actors, provincial, federal, municipal, elders, spiritual leaders, and understanding what the challenges, what the concerns are, and understanding that within the Canadian policy landscape. It was critical for me to understand. I thought maybe that's my contribution. It's such a complex world, and maybe I can go back and understand that landscape, and then be able to forge through what people are telling me needs to happen. We need to understand sort of the rules of the game. How is water governed here in Canada, and what are people's roles, and how do we incite change? We know we have a democratic society where we can vote, but I mean, where are those pivotal leverage points, and who has responsibility? And so all these questions we're going through it. And in the end, I mean, I wrote a 200-page dissertation, and I'm working on publications now to get that information out there. But when it emerged to me in speaking with the Hui-Ling people and the First Nations people I spoke with, that when we're looking at water security for the future, we're really looking at 3 levels. And there was that really technical level, and that's the level that Cheyenne was speaking of, and that's generally the level of how water is looked at within communities. But also, talking, what resonated with me and speaking with people was the social political level of water security, being able to exercise inherent responsibilities and rights to protect water, because right now the current system, indigenous people and Hui-Ling people have very little roles in decision making on any water decision making in this country at this time. Even on reserves, it's very limited power. So that was something that resonated, because it came to me that if these teachings are there, we have these ways, how do they become part of decision making? And until they are, I felt we're just going to continue to sit here. I believe in the spiritual and collective consciousness of working together, but I still think that there needs to be a way in which that impacts decision making. So I looked at the social political level, and then ultimately, though, what came from the researchers and what we know, having been here and academic, it has to emerge from the research as well, is this knowledge of ecological protection of this larger ecosystem. And it is when we approach these three levels of water security, I think we can move towards secure water and for everyone. Although my focus at that time was First Nations. But I always had the strong belief that it's the indigenous approaches and these spiritual ways of living in harmony and balance with nature that will help and will contribute to a sustainable future for all. So that was sort of through the research, and I left that, and my research goes into these ways of, and as Jane had mentioned, it's more just to understand it, but also to forge through with some solutions. Well, what does this mean? You know, this. So I looked at various levels and spoke to many people, and ultimately I think what came out of my research is we have multiple levels of action, and there are ways, and it's for each of us, and I think it comes out of this, we all have a way of contributing to these multiple levels of actions. I looked at some of the other countries and what other indigenous peoples were doing, although, and there's these, and it's very complex with this very high level, when I talk about these constitutional changes, something that we need here in Canada, that high level constitutional protection of water. Canada, we have a national water policy that's outdated, I think, from the 70s, but we don't have a water security strategy. That's something we should all be advocating for, and there are people around the country doing that, that we need to protect water for everyone. That's not out there. Our federal government has not done that, nor the provinces who hold jurisdiction for water. And at that constitutional level, when I looked at other countries, I see, for example, Australia, they have entrenched indigenous rights into the constitution, so indigenous peoples have right to water decision making, being part of this processes. Communities are involved in water boards, making decisions, bringing these values, these ways, these principles, these historic understandings into modern contemporary decision making. So that's one another level, and there's other models there as well. I think it was South Africa that has it was in the Constitution for all people, the right to a healthy environment. Those are rights that we don't have those. They're not constitutionally entrenched in our legal system, and they may be in other small legislation, but at this very high level, which then sets the framework for other actions. Then there's like the policy level, and there's some challenges to that. But and I think what's most reflective here, maybe important here, is the operational level, and that seemed to be the most critical level in terms of where action can happen. Because as we know, constitutional change is a long-term, slow-moving process, and it's not to say that that shouldn't continue and that reform and advocating for that reform shouldn't take place. It's to say that while that takes place and people know their role and their duty to work at that level, maybe there's others that can work at the operational level. And that entails what I would say through my research is collaboration, is working together, seeking opportunities within the understanding of policy, and working with governments and organizations and people together to make a difference. And there's examples out there, and they're across the country. And, for example, one example that emerged was at Sesame. The Hui-Ling Environmental Task Force works with the province on the Model Forests project, where indigenous values are part of the forestry planning process, and they are part of the decision making. Small scale opportunities where that happens. Where I was doing my research at Kettle Point, and I'm sure it emerged in the Ipperwash inquiry, was the formation of a municipal board, where it's not a requirement by law to work together, nor is it even a jurisdiction of the municipality, but they recognize we have shared watershed boundaries, common interests. It's like, let's set the policy aside and just work together. So they work together on a municipal board, bringing leadership together to forge through common goals and setting things aside. Perhaps one of the, and so that's sort of my research phase. That's the work I do with Laurier and with teaching, and so it took me 5 years to finish my doctoral degree, and now I'm hoping to pass that information on and working with students and continuing my own journey as a Haudenosaunee woman. I was not fortunate, or I was unfortunate that I didn't learn the teachings, but for the last 15 years working in community. When I was finished my degree, I went back to the community. Although people were saying, why aren't you going to a university? And I said, I will when the time's right. I need to reground myself now and take this knowledge that I've learned in terms of policy and work back with my chiefs in my community to then reframe that or reground myself. So that brings me to the project that I'm working on with the Haudenosaunee Confederacy Chiefs Council. and the traditional governance. That's the traditional chiefs of the Haudenosaunee people. Some of the chiefs have delegated authority to the Haudenosaunee Development Institute. It's a group of individuals that represent the chiefs. I work with the chiefs, representatives from the chiefs, as well as representatives from the city of Hamilton. So there's a joint stewardship board that's been formed, and I coordinate that board. I coordinate their activities. And their activities are for joint stewardship of a watershed within the city of Hamilton. It's a very contentious issue. Watershed was some would say destroyed, others would say disrupted, others would say altered, for a parkway to be put in to meet municipal growing and urban planning needs. And there's a long history of conflict over that land, but we're 5 years post-construction of that parkway now, and what has emerged through it is a series of framework agreements, economic agreements, and human heritage and archaeological things that we wanted to protect and respect. What emerged is a joint stewardship agreement, and that is where the chiefs, the traditional chiefs, which is this is quite novel in Canada because often governments only look at the elected chief and council to negotiate with, but in this case the Confederacy chiefs are working with the city of Hamilton, and we're forging through on environmental monitoring. So we're bringing in our own Haudenosaunee trained environmental monitors to actually oversee some of the work as well. We're working on an environmental master plan for the Red Hill Valley in the city of Hamilton. We're looking at now planning out till 2080. For the city of Hamilton, that's a long-term planning process. For the Haudenosaunee, it's obviously quite minor, but it's a step ahead. I just brought this because I leave it in my briefcase always, because it just reminds me of bringing the worlds together, or the ways together. This is the wampum that the city presented to the mayor of the city of Hamilton, and it's to represent our working relationship in our agreement, where we're bridging where we signed the agreements, the formal legal agreements as per the city requirements, but we also brought forth some time ago, I wasn't part of it, but I know I am the carrier of this on behalf of the Haudenosaunee, is the Fire of the Valley, and this is the wampum that guides our guardian principles in each of these wampum streets. It represents one of our critical principles that we agreed upon, and we agreed to every time we come meet once a month with the city of Hamilton, and that is respect and trust and friendship. And they're sort of model the condolence ceremony of one of the traditions of the Haudenosaunee. So why I brought that is just it reminds me that there are ways, because through all of this, I think I continue to come back with how do we begin to do this? How do we begin to articulate this? And how do we begin to make change? And my research helped me to understand these challenges from different perspectives, from the governmental perspective, from the community perspective, from the spiritual perspective, from the perspective that water to some is H2O, it's a chemical composite, there's something to look at in that level, but to many it's the other end of the spectrum, where it is life, it is a living entity, and then how do we bridge these views? So I think there are ways, and I know it's getting late in the day, but I do go through some of them, and but what I advocate for is what we've talked about as well, and it's a question that I still say to myself, so where do I contribute, and how do I contribute? For most people, I would say that we need to advocate for water protection, and just something simple, saying we need a national strategy to protect our water. We need to look at what other countries are doing, and that might be something we can promote to our local politicians. As Indigenous people, as Ongahomwe, and within our communities, I think we need to be able to articulate how we put this into practice. And I'll say that, for example, because I've had communities say, we're in the position now where the city of Hamilton said, okay, you're going to be part of this environmental monitoring. How do we do it? And when we say we have people that will come out and monitor, but I think it's in the community, we're not quite sure as well. We know how, but then we have to bridge these ways of it. And there's other examples as well. But there are examples of collaboration, and I think we can look to other nations as well, other Indigenous peoples around the world. Others are moving further ahead. We're a little behind here in Canada. There's ways of protecting rights and responsibilities. You want to look at a legal framework as a right, and there's a way of protecting inherent responsibilities. And I think and I just really advocate for taking a sort of strategic look at how we can forge through involved, everybody has a role, whether it be in education or educating the future generations or within the policy bill. So that's what I wanted to say, because I know we're really over time here, and Nyawan,